So, for everyone watching, you believe that in 2013, when Pope Benedict issued his declaration and the world saw him resign the papacy, you believe there's a defect in that resignation in the Latin regarding the munus in ministerium. And that means that the conclave that elected Pope Francis in 2013 was invalid. And therefore, Pope Francis was an anti pope.
That's correct, because Canon 188 of the 1983 Code of Canon Law, which we operate under, says that any resignation that is made out of substantial error is invalid on its face by the law itself.
Where does that put everyone that holds your position after December 31st? I know that some people online have said, oh, y'all are all Benevacantist, etc. Where are you, Dr. Mazza?
You did a tweet where you asked, is Pope Benedict the real Pope? And I think only 46% said yes, right?
Yep.
But then you also importantly asked the question, why do people get irrationally angry at that question? Because there are people who get irrationally angry. They call people like myself Benevacantists or Sedevacantists or schismatic. For example, the next day after Pope Benedict died, Matt Fradd put out a tweet and he says, quote, "Make no bloody mistake about it. It is active schism and therefore a grave sin for a Catholic to deny the papacy of Pope Francis. Shame on any Catholic who legitimizes this position, saying that it is within the realm of orthodoxy."
I've just talked to and had these discussions with Sedevacantists, those that hold that Benedict are the Pope. I still hold the classical recognize and resist position, but I'm open to hearing these different perspectives because I do believe that we're living under an ecclesiastical crisis like the church has never seen before. So my default position is let's be charitable. It's confusing. And kind of in the back of my mind always is St. Vincent Ferrer, who was a Dominican theologian, a preacher, who for a lengthy bit of time followed and submitted and celebrated his masses in communion with what the church now declares as an anti-pope. And yet St. Vincent was raising the dead and converting souls and all manner of miracles. Perhaps, I don't know, after the apostles, if there's been a saint who worked so many miracles as St. Vincent. And yet, oddly enough, during this time of crisis, he, for a period, was in communion with an anti-pope. I don't take the position, maybe I misunderstand Fradd's position, but I don't take the hardliner position that this de facto puts you in a state of mortal sin, because schism is, according to Thomas Aquinas and Dante and the great thinkers, worse than heresy. I mean, it's worse than sodomy. It's worse. I mean, it's a big, so, to come out guns blazing.
Because it's a sin against charity.
It is. It's a sin against charity, whereas heresy is a sin against faith. So I just think we need to take a deep breath and realize we do have a pontiff in Rome, or you would say an alleged pontiff, who is saying things that seem quite contrary to previous popes and to Catholic tradition. And I think everyone's trying to figure out how this works out, because Vatican I never dealt, although these discussions were debated at Vatican I, there was no definitive doctrinal treatment on what if you have a pope in manifest heresy. Of course, Robert Bellarmine talks about that. I don't know, how would you counter the idea that you are a schismatic or in a state of mortal sin or separation from God?
Let's look at some doctors of the church or some saints and wise people. For example, the Dominican Cajetan, who debated Martin Luther. Let me give you just the exact quote for him. He says, "If someone, for a reasonable motive, holds the person of the Pope in suspicion and refuses his presence and even his jurisdiction, he does not commit the delict of schism, nor any other whatsoever, provided that he be ready to accept the Pope were he not held in suspicion." Now, in terms of what would be the criteria, I would say Benedict continued to wear white. He continued to give apostolic blessings, which only a pope can do. He continued to be called His Holiness when only a pope can be called that. He continued to resign in the Vatican, and he continued to call himself pope, although he called himself Pope Emeritus, which has never existed before in 2,000 years of church history. 2 months ago, I was published in the Archivio Juridico, which is associated with the University of Bologna. A lot of people on the internet try to say Mazza and these Benevacantists, they're just crackpots. And no, this is solid scholarship. They accepted a peer-reviewed article and published it. So this is mainstream. This is not crackpot stuff. And the people who put this journal together, some of them are actually working with Pope Francis on the new, maybe perhaps rules that will come out governing papal resignations in the future.
So are you a sedevacantist now? Well, what does it leave? Where does it leave you after December 31st?
We have what normally happens when a pope dies. We have an interregnum.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it takes a few weeks. Some of them lasted 2 years, 3 years, but those were the exceptions. Those were not the rule.
All right. So we're in the interregnum. You're saying from December 31st till now, there is no pope.
It seems that way.